This is an interview between Pauline Stewart and Ron Dalton for the Nanga Brook History Project. The interview is taking place on the 29th of April 2010. Ron, can we start the interview by you telling me when and where you were born?
Yes, I was born at Dwelling Up in 1936 on the 21st of May. My parents were living at Nanga Brook, and I was born at Dwelling Up Hospital.
And what were your parents' names?
Doris Maud was my mother. She was previously an Eastcott, and Dad was Leonard John Dalton. I had an elder brother, James Leonard Dalton, sister Janice May Dalton, and Terence Dalton that later died when he was 5.
When did your parents go to Nanga Brook?
I'm not real sure about that. It would have been probably before the 1920s. Mum didn't, but Mum was at Hollyoak.
Were all the children born in Dwelling Up or Yarloop?
No, Janice was born in Perth during the war, and Terry was born at Yarloop, and Jimmy was born at Yarloop.
And did you spend all your childhood in Nanga Brook?
No, we lived at Nanga Brook when I was born, and then Dad got a job up in the goldfields at Mount Palmer. And when I was 12 months old, the day Mum arrived up there, I turned 1. So we were there then until the outbreak of the war. And then Dad enlisted, it must be at 1941, and we came to Perth.
Do you remember your life in the goldfields?
I can remember bits of it, yeah, at Mount Palmer. I can remember when the water first come on. We used to get water by truck, and you could only wash in little dishes and that sort of thing, and then they got the water laid on. How I can remember it is because Jimmy fiddled with a tap down the street, water went squirting everywhere. We were only little, and it was a wee one, but I can remember that quite distinctly. And I remember he used to, when Mum and Dad go out at night, he'd sneak out with me and take me down to the pictures. And we'd stand at the door, and the usher used to come and get us and sit us down the front. Sometimes Mum and Dad would come looking for us because they'd come home and we weren't home. They'd guess where we'd be, and we'd down the pictures. I can remember that. Remember getting caught in a dust storm up there once. Again, Jimmy took me out somewhere on a little bike, and Dad had to come looking for us. I remember him wheeling us home on the bike and all this.
Was it scary?
Storm. No, well, it was scary because he was going to give us a hiding when we got home. So I remember him saying, "So my foot's as sore, Daddy," and he said, "Your arse is going to be sore," you know. But he didn't. Too busy wiping the dirt out of our face.
What do you remember about your early childhood in Nanga Brook, when you were a little fellow?
Well, so the first thing I can remember, or mainly remember, is going to that send-off for Dad when he joined the army. They had a big show down the hall. There was 3 or 4 blokes went. And they presented him with a watch with the inscription on it. And I remember the people, or 2 youths named Albert Tenardi and Hugo Tenardi, well, they were piggybacking us around the front of the hall. And I remember the mill down below the hall, that was the old mill before the fire.
So how old would you have been then, Ron?
I'd been about 5. Well, I would have been 5 because it was late 45. No, late 41.
Tell me a little bit about when you first went to school.
Yeah, I went to school at North Perth. I think we were going there for about, must be nearly 12 months, and then we shifted to Jarrahdale. And I was at Jarrahdale. We were at Jarrahdale till the end of 1945 when the war finished. That's when we went to Nanga Brook. So I did my early school at North Perth School.
Do you remember where that school was?
Yeah, up in...
Is it Angove Street? Or?
Yeah, I think it became Angove Street after Scarborough Beach Road.
Yes.
Those days it used to be called North Beach Road, and then it'd go on to Angove Street. You know where the Rosemount Theatre was? It was below that on the left, still there. Yeah.
And why did you go to Jarrahdale this time?
Dad was away and we were kids and we used to fight a bit with our cousins because we were staying at Mum's sister's place. So Mum decided she rented a house in Jarrahdale that belonged to one of our uncles, Jim Sparkman, and we lived there. It was down near the creek at Jarrahdale, well isolated from everybody. It was quite good. We were there right up until the end of the war.
So you had lots of relatives there?
No,
in Jarrahdale?
Dad's had a sister there, but she left. Oh, we were only there about 12 months, and she left. Her and old Doc finished up getting divorced. Dad had relatives there, the Nettletons. That was Nana's sister's husband. Yeah.
And what was at Jarrahdale at the time? There was a mill, I take it?
Yeah, there was a mill.
Orchards.
It was quite a big mill. Not a lot of orchards, I think. There probably was.
So it was basically a timber town?
Basically a timber mill, yeah. Dad was born at Jarrahdale, number 4 mill actually. I think that's under the Serpentine Dam now. Must have been my second year at Jarrahdale. There was their headmaster and 2 teachers, I think.
Can you remember your dad coming home?
Yeah, I remember coming home.
What was that like?
Oh, wonderful. Couldn't believe it, you know.
Did you feel strange because he'd been away for so long?
He'd been home on leave a few times. When he finished up in New Guinea, he was garrisoned in Queensland, because he went from Queensland to Morotai, and that's where he was when the war finished. And he come back fairly soon, must have been about November, I think, 45, when he was discharged.
Was he traumatised by the war?
Well, he didn't seem to be to me. It did alter him a bit. And I suppose 4 or 5 years only living with men, you know. No, he was pretty good.
What happened then when he got back?
Well, during that time, Nana went missing at Nanga Brook, and he went up there and they had a look for her in the bush. They found her, she was all right, but she had a bit of a mental problem and she had to go to Heathcote. She was treated for that. You know, in the meantime, Dad had got a job back with Miller's Timber and Trading Company at Nanga Brook. It must have been about November 1945 we shifted back to Nanga Brook.
So your grandparents were living in the town at the time?
Old Russ he must have been working, I know he worked on the Samson's Dam, but when we actually went back to Nanga Brook, I'm not sure what he was doing. I know he finished up driving the horse and cart, but when we went back to Nanga Brook, old Jim Wilson was driving.
He lived a little bit out of town, didn't he?
Yeah,
what was the origin of that?
Don't know. He had a house built there. He leased land. He had a 99-year lease. It was on the road towards Waroona, and it would have been approximately a mile and a half from the mill. And they lived right on the railway line. At that time, that railway line finished just up past their place. It used to previously go to Yarloop, round where Samson's Dam was. But when they put Samson's Dam in, they changed and came in the other side of Nanga Brook from Yarloop.
And did they take the railway line up, or did they just leave it there?
The railway line was taken up about 500 yards past Russ's place, because there was a string of rail trucks still there, the timber jinkers that they used to use to cart the logs. They were still on that line. And we used to run them down the hill a little bit.
When you went back, apart from your grandparents, did you have any other relatives?
Yeah, Dad had a sister. He had a sister living with Nana, a brother, that's old Dido, and brother Jim. I think that was all he had there at that time. Later on, Auntie Con shifted there and Auntie Joyce got married.
After the war, did the mill return to full production quite quickly?
Yeah, well, it was on a limited production right from when it was built. It was only allowed to cut 33 load a day, which was a measurement they used in those days. That was on the round. On the square, they had to get about 33% to show a profit. And that was pretty well what it cut right through, I think, till it burned down.
What sort of a job did your dad have when he first went back?
Dad was timber foreman with the axe and crosscut. And then after a couple of years, he got the job driving the log truck. And he did that right up until the fire.
Did you get on with your brothers and sisters?
Yeah, we get on good.
What sort of things did you do for fun as a little school child?
At Jarrahdale, we used to go tadpoling in the creek a fair bit. We'd take a frying pan down and cook them on the spot. And just general mucking around as kids.
What about at Nanga Brook? You were getting a bit older then.
Getting a bit older. We used to swim in Cossey's pool. That was the main one, when we were allowed. We weren't allowed if it was too
Which
cold.
one was Cossey's pool? Was that the one down in the river? Or was it?
No, in the creek.
Yes.
There was a little bridge going around. You remember that formation that went around? There was a bridge back just below where Ridley's were. You know, where they lived on the corner? Just below that was Cossey's pool. We'd had it dammed up a bit and the water used to bank up. We used to swim in that. Because later we sort of waddled down to the river when Mum didn't know. We'd always ask Dad and he'd tell us, yes, we can go, but Mum never would. She wouldn't let us go to the river.
Did you teach yourself to swim?
Yeah, taught ourselves. In Cossey's pool.
Did you play any sport?
We used to play a bit of bush hockey at school. That was with sticks out of the bush and tennis balls, and cricket. We used to play a bit of cricket. A bit of football. We kicked the football. We had a football, floppy old thing, and had a basketball hoop. We used to throw a bit into the basketball like girls do. You know.
Was the school always where it was?
Yeah, the school was always just as you come from the road and dwelling up straight across, as you come across the bridge.
And was it a one or two teacher school when you...
Only one teacher.
Was that always the case?
No. I don't know about previously. There was probably 2 or 3 teachers there, I don't know. But when we went there, Elsie Holderness was the teacher. There was only 11 kids and my brother and myself made 13. And some of those kids, like Janice Johnson and Vera Starrett and Eileen Gedling, they were only 4, but they had to go to school to make up the numbers. So they used to sleep during the day mostly.
Did the school ever close because of lack of children?
No, not while we were there.
And how did the school run with because you would have had children from, as you say, 4 or 5 right through to 14?
Yeah, we were all in the one classroom, 6 classes. We were sort of segregated in the class, into our classes. And it just worked that way. One teacher, and he'd teach us all. A lot of stuff he could do to the whole class, others he had to do individually. It worked. Drill, and we used to do drill every morning and get out and warm up. Later on, we planted trees around the school and things like that.
We're talking about your childhood. Did anyone have motor cars then?
Jock Johnson had a car, Ralph Powell had a car, and the office bloke, they called, it'll probably come to me in a while, he had a car, Don Huggins, he had a car, he had a little square car. That was the only 2 cars, and then Uncle and Auntie, Fred and Ada Jakes came there and they had a car. And then Ernie Dido Dalton, he bought a car. And I think in about 1948, Dad bought an old Chev. We had that. So
did that mean, Ron, that you were fairly isolated in the town?
Yeah. We used to... we stayed there pretty well. Later when Dad got a car, we used to go to Aruna probably every second Saturday, usually after payday. So he used to get paid fortnightly. And we'd go down and Mum would go shopping. We used to go to Aruna because the bridge to Dwellingup was still burnt out. They hadn't replaced it.
What about the train? Were you allowed to ride on that?
Yeah, the train
to
ran
Yarloop?
from Yarloop to Nanga Brook. I can only remember riding on it once. For some reason we come from Yarloop to Nanga Brook on it. But that was about the only time I rode on it, apart from that Nanga itself. Sometimes we'd ride from the store up to Nana's and back to Powell's and then back to the mill. Sometimes we'd get on it.
What happened when you reached 14? Was there an expectation that you would work in the mill?
Yeah, I kept going to school after I turned 14, and the year I turned 15 I left school and I got a job. I worked out in the bush for about a month.
What doing?
I just doing nothing practically, helping make roads with Stan Roberts actually.
Yes.
I used to swamp for him, he had the bulldozer and I used to pick up the sticks. I worked there for about a month and then I got a job tailing out in the mill.
Did they try to find a job for everybody?
Most of the boys when they left school got a job in the mill. I can't think of any that didn't. Jimmy was working out the bush, he was swamping and then later driving a tractor.
What does swamping mean?
You put the rope on the logs for the tractor driver and you sneak the rope back and put it on the log and cut the end off the log so to slide through the mud easier or whatever and put the rope around it.
Tell me a little bit about how the mill worked. I mean, start from first thing in the morning, I guess, with the boilers fired up.
Well, for a start, Jock Johnson and Tommy Harmer used to go down to the mill. Jock would fire the boiler up or it used to burn all night, but he'd stoke it up and get it going, get the steam up, and Tommy Harmer used to do the greasing up. And Jock used to grease the boiler and that. And 6:45 he'd blow.
What do you mean greasing up the rest of the mill? I can understand the boiler. What?
Well, all the benches and twin saws and docker and the belt races, they all had to be greased. You know, with oil, they used to put oil into little reservoirs that were on the top of the bench because they weren't sealed bearings. They were all just white metal bearings. And they had to have oil. They had to be greased at least 3 times a day.
What would happen if they weren't? I mean, what?
Well, they'd get hot.
Yes.
What you call a hot box, and the white metal would melt, and of course you wouldn't have a bearing in the. Everything would jump around in the. Well, the mill just wouldn't run.
Okay.
At 6:45 they'd blow a whistle. That was supposed to get people out of bed. 7:20 they'd blow a whistle, warn you to come to work. 7:30 final whistle went and that meant you started work. That was the way that run.
And what happened when everyone got to the mill?
Yeah, well, you just took up your working positions and usually the cleaning had been done the night before by a couple of blokes who used to stay back on overtime and clean up. Well, you'd just normally start work and they'd start the mill. That used to start from the boiler. They'd switch that on and a big wheel that used to drive all the other benches, shafts running through the mill were all joined by big wide belts. And you had your twin saws, your number 1 bench, your docker. When I first went there wasn't a little bench. They later put that in. And then you had your sawdust hopper.
Who in the mill decided, there'd be logs out on the landing, Who decided what saw they would go into, or did they always go?
They all went into the one place. Mm-hmm. And Jock Johnson used to drive the winch and roll the logs up and cut them with the donkey engine. That was a upright engine that with a crosscut saw on it, and that used to cut the logs for required length, whatever length they wanted. And they were all on the landing just above the mill. And they'd have a swamper there again who'd be what they called the hook man, and he'd be put the hook on while Jock drove the winch. They'd roll them up. They had a trolley in the mill that they'd winch back with a rope. Then they'll loaded onto a trolley that was connected to where the twin saws were by a wire rope, which they used to winch back into position and roll the logs onto it, and then that'd be just let run down it back into the mill, where it was loaded onto a what they called a traveller, and that was a sort of big trolley that the logs were rolled onto, and it had hooks that they used to hook the log down and tie it down so the log could go through the saw. That had a movable thing on it. You could winch it forward with a big lever that'd push the log out so it'd go through the saw, and once you'd taken the first flitch off, which is the rounded part, you'd turn it down and take another flitch off, and then you could start planking, where you had a gauge. If you wanted a 4-inch bit of wood, you'd move it out 4 inches onto the gauge, or 8 inches, you'd move it out 8 inches onto the gauge. And that'd go through the twins onto a set of skids where it stayed to go down to the big bench, the number 1 bench. But you had 4 men operating that. You had a benchman, leverman and 2 tailor outs. Where on the twin saws you had a twin sawyer, and he had a swamper that used to help with the logs. Used to put a chain over the log when it went through the saw, hammer it in so it wouldn't fall, and then when it got through the saw he'd knock that chain out, or they'd pull the flitch over so that it'd slide down the skids. And they'd just pile the wood up on the skids till the benchman could cut it.
So were the orders for the size, were they fairly standard, or did they vary from day to day?
They varied from day to day, but fairly standard when I was working there, because you were limited on what we could cut. But any orders would be written up near the bench. The foreman used to come down and write them up on the order book, and you'd watch that and you could see what you had to cut, and you cut it. But there was a lot of standard wood like 4x2, 4x1, wide boards. A lot of them were standard, and they'd go into what they call stock.
The wood came through the big bench in its various sizes,
Yeah.
and then what happened to it?
When you're cutting on the bench, say you get a flitch, a wide flitch, well you start cutting that on the bench. You take a small piece off on the left-hand side, and the tailor outs will put that on skids over the other side, and then you plank your wood to the sizes you want it. That goes on the skids the other side on the other side of the bench. When you're ready for it, they send it back, and you start cutting whatever you've got to cut out of it. And that used to go to skids on the left-hand side, which went to the docker. Those skids were about probably 10 foot, 11 foot long. And they went to rollers where you had a marker and a dockerman they'd measure it to size and cut it and stack it, and then they had a bloke taking the wood out on the rollers, and he'd stack it where it had to go in the yard. Some of it went on close skids, which went straight from the docker. Others had to go down to where they had a trolley, and other yard blokes used to take the wood out to these skids further down and just spread them out to where they needed them. When they were loading them on the train, they had the rail trucks there, and they used to put them straight onto them.
And so there's a lot of moving around of the timber, and you're saying that there are skids and there are trolleys.
Yeah.
But was there much manual?
It was all manual.
So you still had to lift the timber?
Yeah. Oh, most of it slid along the skids, most of it. Yeah, see, with a benchman, he had a trolley with a movable top. It had a square piece of steel on rollers, and that'd move. So you could move the wood quite easily, especially if you kept the top oiled. But that worked quite good.
So it'd have to be good teamwork.
It was teamwork. You had to sort of know what you're doing, and you had to keep your work up so the others could keep working. If you got someone that was a bit slow, well, things just banked up. And say your skids going to the docker blocked up, you just have to wait until they cleared so you can keep working. That didn't happen very often.
And so how did you become skilled in these particular roles? Obviously the twin sawyer, the big benchman were key people. How did you actually get trained and get those positions?
When I first went to work, I was put tonally up with Marty Hall. And Marty had been there for a year or two. He knew how to tail out and he showed me how to do it. And that's the way it used to go. Whoever was there would show the other person how to do it. And then I sort of transferred to the little bench. I was benching on that, I was benchman on the little bench, and from there I used to do days on the big bench when the regular benchman was off sick or absent, and then we finished up doing a day about. That was Ken Roberts and myself. So we worked day about.
And who was responsible for allocating these tasks?
George Gedling, he was the foreman, and he was the expert. He'd lived in Millsville his life. His father used to be the foreman of the big mill. He was very experienced and a very good benchman.
And did he move around the mill while this was happening?
He'd come and talk to you, or mainly he sat on a skid at the end of the mill and just watched. But he was pretty good.
And was the atmosphere nice?
Yeah, friendly. Now and then someone would have a bit of a blue, but generally it was good. So now and then us young blokes used to throw a bit of mud around out the logs. Sometimes it'd hit the tally book and we'd get into trouble.
So most people came and stayed in the mill for, a decent length of time?
Yeah, most of them did, yeah. Some come and went. There was a few itinerant sort of people who'd come and stay a few months and go, but most of them were there for years, Most of the time I was there, it was mostly the same crew.
And did the men give you young fellas a bad time, or did they look after you?
No. Oh, they threatened to kick our arse occasionally, but mostly they were pretty good. They'd skylark at you a bit and try and have you on, like send you up to get a tooth for the saw or something. We played those games ourselves. So we had our own, the mill had its own file shop where old Ralph Powell used to file the saws. That was up near the twin saws. He used to do that all during the day. And when he wasn't filing saws, he was down working on the rollers, putting the timber out.
And what about having a break? Did you have what did you do for lunch and morning tea?
9:30, we'd have morning tea. There'd be a biff with a whistle, and they'd turn the engine off for about 10 minutes while we had a cup of tea and sandwich, whatever we took to work. You had what you took. No, they didn't supply anything.
Did you take it in a billy?
In a billy, and used to hang that on the boiler. There was a rail under the boiler, and that used to keep it not hot but warm.
Must have been a bit stewed.
Yeah. But it was all right, it was a drink. At lunchtime, 11:30, we'd knock off and go home, usually walk home. 20 past 12, they'd blow a little whistle to tell you it was time to come back to work. 12:30, we'd all be back and start again. Then 4:30, or 3 o'clock, we'd have afternoon tea, 10 minutes again. Usually you'd change your saws in that time as well, while the mill was stopped.
What do you mean change? What?
Well, put a sharp saw in the bench, or...
So it would be completely taken out?
Yeah, take it out.
And how often was that done?
Usually twice a day, unless you hit something. That was with the benches. The docker were only probably every week or 2 weeks. But the twin saws, they were about once a week. They change them.
We talked a bit about the wood being loaded directly onto the railway truck.
Yeah.
So how often was that taken away?
3 times a week. It was Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. Train used to come. They used to bring the stores up from Yarloop as well. So that's how we used to get our groceries and bread and meat. All used to come on the train. The women would have to go down to the old store and wait for the train and collect their stores.
Can you remember when there was actually a proper store at Nanga?
No, it was all, the store was there, but it was closed. I can't remember it operating. Old Maggie Davis had a shop in the post office, but that was closed too. But I remember all the shelves and drawers and that were in there, and still some of the goods that she used to sell. But all that had finished. In the old butcher shop, there was still a butcher's block and that. Then they shifted all that out and they used to keep the log truck in there. And the old store, they used to keep the what they called the blitz buggy. That was the car that used to take the fallers and bush workers out to work.
It sounds a pretty dangerous work environment, even though it was pretty well organised. Did accidents happen?
Not very often. I nearly cut my thumb off once. That was through carelessness. Watching what was coming and not watching what I was doing. A bit of bark broke off and my hand flew forward and hit the saw and I cut it off. And another young bloke got 3 fingers cut off, Arthur Stewart. But they're about the only ones I can remember really getting anything bad.
So I suppose, Ron, in those days there wouldn't have been such a thing as a health and occupational safety.
No.
There must have been some rules.
Yeah, we had a union.
Yes.
We had a union rep. That was Ralph Powell, and he used to collect the union dues every year. And
if there was an accident, would he come and say what happened? And
yeah, a bloke called Bernie Betcher, he was the estate works inspector, and he used to come around probably 3 or 4 times a year and check everything, make sure guards were in place on the saws and everything was being done properly. You know, they had their rules. You had to abide by them. And if there's anything unsafe, well, they'd report it to the works inspector and they'd be made to shift it. Millers were a reputable firm. They sort of had to keep things up to date.
it was in their best interests, I suppose, wasn't it?
In their best interests, yeah, not to get people hurt. I mean, there had been people killed on the landing at Nanga Brook. Your father was injured on the landing. Got caught between 2 trucks, I think, or something.
So getting back to your union, did you go to union meetings?
Yes, so they'd have a union meeting, usually down at the mill. They'd call a union meeting, usually run during work time. Say at 3 o'clock or something, they'd stop and have a union meeting.
So that was all part of your conditions?
Yeah.
It was...
Yeah, some people didn't want to join the union. In later years, they were sort of forced to.
Were the unions in those days, so we're looking at, when would that have been? Early 50s, wouldn't it, when you were in the mill?
Early 50s, yeah.
So I suppose there was still that Reds under the bed unions associated with...
No, they weren't militant.
They weren't?
Well, the Timbers Workers Union wasn't militant. Never was. Actually, all it used to do for us was get our wages, you know. You get a wage rise, they'd do it for you through the court, arbitration court. And we never used to have to worry about it.
Did it come regularly?
Yeah, about every 3 months they'd have a claim. Might be 1 threepence a week or something. They'd put the claim up.
And what other conditions did you work under? For instance, what happened if you got sick? Did you have sick leave?
Well, yeah, I had 1 week off once I got the flu and I was fairly young and I had to go home to bed, but that was the only time I was ever off.
And were you paid?
Yeah, I was.
And can you remember how long you could be off sick? Was it limited, I suppose?
They never really had a limit as long as you're coming back.
Yes.
But you wouldn't get paid, of course, if you're off for too long.
And what about holidays?
Christmas holidays was 2 weeks.
And did the whole mill close down?
The whole mill closed down, bush, the lot. And they'd bring the tractor in from the bush and that was it. Easter, we used to have, I think it was 10 days off, because we had Easter, but during the year we wouldn't have Mondays off on long weekends. We'd work through those, take them all at Easter, so that we could have the long break at Easter. So we had the 2 lots of holidays. But from Easter on till Christmas was just straight through. We were always on the 40-hour week when I was working. Before that they used to have a 44-hour week and before that a 48-hour week. But it was always a 40-hour week.
So to your knowledge you didn't have any industrial action as such, no grievances as such?
The only time I had a bit of a grievance was over water, I think. Water, and I think it was getting stale butter or something. And the bush crew come in, they had a bit of a meeting, but they all got settled down. That was the only time they had to stop work meeting.
So Ron, you're telling me what happened to the timber once it got to the mill,
Yeah.
but perhaps you can tell me a little bit about the bush gangs and what they did. And
Yeah, well, they had 4 or 5 faulers, 2 tractor drivers, and the log truck driver plus a foreman. Falling was all done by hand, which was axe and cross cut, where they'd put a scarf in the front of the log, then they'd back it down by using the saw, and the log would fall where they wanted it to fall. They'd then crown it off, which is cut the limbs off the top, and then, of course, the swamper for the tractor driver would come and get the log ready to be hauled down to the landing where they'd load the truck. And all these logs were brought down to the landing, the truck had come in, and the logs would be pulled onto a jinker by using wire ropes, which they'd hook on behind the tractor, bring them back, loop them over the logs and pull them up posts onto the truck and roll them onto the truck.
when they went to an area for felling, did they create a temporary landing?
Yeah, they used to make a landing with the tractor. They'd usually move up, push up a bit of land. It was usually flat, wasn't always have a base on it, and that's why they used to use the poles to put the logs up. When they got out the bush, the trees that they were to fall were already marked. The forestry had marked which ones they to fall, and they used to put a toe mark in the front of them which direction to fall them, near as possible. So they'd fall the trees so they wouldn't hit saplings. That was the way it was. And they used to have blocks marked out each faller to work on. He'd have his own block, and he might be there for a week, cutting logs off that block.
I mean, the forest is very thick, so how did the tractor get to pull the log in?
They'd push and make their road up.
So just
They'd make a snig track, they'd go up, and sometimes used to have to wind in and out trees, but they had a snig track that used to pull the logs down. And they'd pull the others into that snig track and pull them all down. See, one time with the old mill, the previous mill, they used to have a steam hauler. Now out along Murray Junction Road, out that way, they had places there where that steam hauler used to get put, and the horses used to tow the rope about half a mile up the bush, and they'd hook onto the logs with that rope and they'd haul it in by steam. That was in the early days. That hauler was still at Nanga Brook when we went back there, but it was out of use. It was sitting on the lines down near the huts. Later on, when the tractors came into being, which was, I think they got their first tractor before the war. That was an old Caterpillar. Then when I went back there, they had an old Caterpillar, and later they got what was called a Cleatrack tractor. That had a winch on it, and they'd winch the logs. But that's the way they used to do it. They'd make their own track in the bush, and sort of had a central snig track where they'd pull the logs down to where the truck was. The truck was usually at the bottom of a hill somewhere where it's easy to bring the logs down to. Never more than probably half a mile.
And tell me about the gang itself.
One side was 4 or 5 fallers. There was 2 tractor drivers. There was old Dido and Jimmy, and the old man was the truck driver. Old Jim Dalton, he was the bush boss. But later when he left, old Dido became bush boss. And Jimmy was driving the tractor. I'm not sure, Bomber did drive one out there for a while, but I'm not too sure about the other one then, what happened. But it might not have got used all the time, but it was there.
And what hours did they work?
We usually left Nanga about 7 o'clock, and they'd be back in by 4:30. They come in the last trip on the log truck. One time they used to come in on the log truck, but then when they got that blitz wagon, they used to come in on that.
And was it hard work?
Falling was hard work. The rest wasn't too bad.
So it was all done with saws, not axes. So what?
No, axes, they used to scarf them with an axe. Then probably about 1953 or 54, Bill Carter he left and went to Treesville and was using a power saw. Well, he did bring that over to Nanga
So what
Brook
year was that?
Must have been about 53 or 54, I'm not sure. It would have been, probably about 53, because he bought an FJ Holden what is at Treesville. So that was that was 54 they bought that out. So it'd be somewhere around about end of 53 when he went. Then Ned Catchpole and I think it might have been Sid Atkins got a Blue Street chainsaw. Well, that was a two-man chainsaw, but it never really worked. And next thing, I think your dad got a chainsaw, and he started using a chainsaw there. Either him or Sid Dalton, one of them was the first.
So what you're saying then is the individual workers could use their own initiative. They could go and buy their own tool to fell. Yeah. So millers didn't actually supply the equipment?
No, not those days. It was even the same when Jimmy was working. They were paid what they call piecework. They used to get paid so much a tonne or so much a metre. Or then it was a load. So many loads. I think old Bill used to get 10 shillings a load in Treesville. He made real good money. Gradually it went down and it sort of come up, but that's how they were paid. They bought their own equipment and maintained their own equipment and paid for it. But they could claim that off their tax, of course.
Overall, they would make more than the mill hand?
Yeah, make better money. They had to work harder. I mean, they had to carry that saw around the bush. It wasn't easy. Trees were cut much better when they cut with a chainsaw because you never had that big ugly scarf in the top which used to chop in about that depth where you lose that off the log. That's got to be cut off in the mill. And with the chainsaw it was usually a saw cut and you had that extra foot quite often.
And what sort of trees were they falling?
Predominantly jarrah. They did get a bit of blackbutt, a little bit of bullich.
What's bullich?
Well, it's a white bullet. I'm not sure how it's spelled. It's a white grows along the creeks out towards Woollera.
And what were they using the blackbutt for? I mean, the jarrah is used for everything, isn't it?
But mainly to cut boards out of the blackbutt. I used to cut quite a bit of it actually, and they would cut a bit of red gum. But the red gum was only used for jinker poles. Used to cut them in about 6 by 6. I used to cut them on the bench with the old man. But it was hard to get a good log of red gum. Because most of that was full of water, water shakes, and it'd just slab off. But if you got a good one, we'd get quite a few poles.
How long would it take them to work an area, or did it vary?
It varied. And naturally, when they had the chainsaws, they were working much quicker. The fallers were usually well ahead of the truck. They'd been in one area probably about 3 months.
And they worked all seasons?
All through, later years they used to change a bit according to the weather. They'd go out to the east country where it was drier.
Because I suppose when it was muddy, it was harder to get the logs in, or not really? If you had a catapult.
No, it wasn't bad, because they were usually on hills, and the mud, if anything, was at the bottom. And they'd get sloppy. I mean, in the summertime, you'd dust that thick. You couldn't hardly see yourself. You always used to come in black.
What about accidents in the bush?
Jock Anthony, he was killed. Old Chip Dalton, our uncle, was driving the tractor and pulling this little portable grader around, and it hit a rock or a root and tipped over, and Anthony was sitting on this grader and it tipped over and killed him. But that was, Jimmy was working out the bush, so it would have been about 52 probably, perhaps a bit earlier. Might have been 50, 51.
What would happen? Did they have a plan if there was an accident? What would happen to the victim?
Well, there he just stayed there till they got someone out to look at him because he was dead.
Yes.
So I suppose they got the undertaker or the police, probably the doctor come out and had a look. But then they took him away.
But what would happen if he was still alive? Or if there was an accident in the mill?
They'd get him and take him in. Well, when Porty cut his fingers off, I drove him to Yarloop. When I cut my thumb, the office bloke run me to the hospital. They used to take you to the hospital. Was
there a person in the, getting back to the mill now, was there a person there that was skilled in first aid?
No. And if they had a first aid kit up at the office, and if it was only a jammed finger or a cut, he'd treat you up there with a bandage or something, whatever. And the sore file, if you got something in your eye, he used to look in that and take it out.
So it was really just one person having a skill. Yeah, it's interesting how times change, isn't it? Because
it wasn't too many people got hurt. But you had no ambulance or anything. That just didn't exist. Because you had the Dwelling Up Hospital, which was, those days, probably about 25 minutes away or 20 minutes. And the next one was Yarloop. Well, we mostly used to go to Yarloop because most of us were in the Yarloop Medical Fund, which meant we got free treatment. How
did that work? Did you have to pay a bit out of your pay?
Yeah, you paid so much every fortnight. It was just like HBF, but it was probably better because the doctor used to come to Nanga Brook every fortnight. He'd come up on the train when it come to pay you. They used to come every second Wednesday and you get your pay. And they had a surgery at Nanga, just that was what it was, the doctor's surgery. And he used to come to that. People would go and see him if they were sick and whatever. They'd get them aspirin and whatever they needed.
What were the main sort of conditions that they got in those days? I suppose it was flu, because it was a pretty damp, cold place in winter, wasn't it?
Never seemed to get a lot of heavy colds. They get them, you get colds. Mostly things you went to the doctor for the kids to get immunisations. See, when they brought out the vaccines for polio and that, everyone had to have them, or everyone had to go up and get their polio. I think it started off with vaccination, Salkland or something.
So what you're saying, the workers had to have it as well as the children?
Everyone had to have it, yeah. 3 times, I think. Yeah, well, that was what those days they called it, infantile paralysis. And every day someone was getting carted off, not from Nanga Brook, but from there. Well, it sort of got to places like Hakea, because Jeff Pollard's brother caught it, and he died. But we weren't allowed to swim in the river then. The doctor said not to swim in the river. But then they brought this Salk vaccine out and it sort of put a stop to infantile paralysis, which later became polio.
Tell me a little bit about the town itself. How was it laid out?
The school was there opposite the Dwelling Up Road. Ralph Powell's was up this way towards Willowdale, be a mile from the mill near enough. Then the creek used to run down round through here. That was old Russ's place. Well, there used to be 2 houses there. There was a third one. That's where we lived when I was born. There was tennis courts here. The bridge over the creek just opposite the school, and the road used to go to Dwelling Up. Then you started with what we called Rubberneck Alley. Well, that was a railway line going down, around, through and round the bottom of all the other houses, back to the mill and onto Yarloop. Along Rubberneck Alley, I think there was about 4 or 5 houses on each side. They were pulled down after I got to Nanga. The railway line come around, this is the railway line. And that was the road was around here. Road come on the outside, round there. And the railway line run round here, that side the store. Because then that line there went down to the bottom of the mill. And they met here somewhere. There was a junction that used to go past the mill. There was a junction there, so they joined up onto this line. Because when the train come up here, it used to go frontwards along there, then it would reverse around here, and then it'd go frontwards that way. So it was a triangle. There was, I think there was originally 4 houses here, 5 here, but they pulled those ones down, they pulled another one down here, and that got pulled down. There was 2 left here. That's where Mum and Dad lived. Harmers lived there. Harmers lived in this one. McCall lived in that one at one time. But when the fire went through, they were living here. That was the old store. That was the old butcher's shop. And there was a little place here where they used to put the truck trailer. Over here, there was that row of houses and a lane for the night cart. Then there was another road here and a hill. And there was houses down there. The boarding house was here. That was all the hill, the hill going down. George Gedling used to live here, and that was the manager's house at the time. Jock Johnson lived there. That was when we first went back to here. There was a water tank down here for the railway line, and the water tank for the town was up here. That used to be gravity fed. The water used to be right up on the Dwellingup Road. It used to run down by 3-inch pipe, and then was refed out to the towns through normal pipes. There was the doctor's surgery here.
What did you do for heating? Obviously, firewood?
Firewood.
And was that free?
Yep, you can get that for nothing. Ours used to come up in the railway trucks, and it was our job to get off and unload them. We used to throw it off. Those days, mostly we used to get 2 foot. The old man wouldn't ask for footwood. They can chop it. So we had to chop it. But later they used to cut it into foot blocks.
So everyone had a big wood pile in the backyard?
Everyone had wood, yeah. Usually you made sure you ordered it in the summertime, so you'd have a big pile.
What was the house like?
Most of your houses were fairly simple. Right, your kitchen, front room, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. Had a veranda, and at the front was... Well, our place was a fairly long veranda. We had a sleep out built on here. That's where Jimmy and myself used to sleep. And our bathroom was here, and the wash house was here. Well, that's where the copper was. Mum used to she used to boil the stuff there and bring it up here where the troughs were. Most of the houses were basically the same, though. Pretty basic.
So weatherboard?
They were weatherboard.
Were they lined?
They lined them with plasterboard. In later years, they were originally lined with wood, slats, quite done properly, and painted with calcimine, and then lined them with plasterboard. Jock Johnson did all that. Our little room was made with asbestos, and we slept in that unpainted asbestos. But those days no one knew anything about it.
And what about your power? What did you do?
With kerosene lamps. Some of them were little ones. Later on we got the power lamps.
The Tillies?
Yeah, Tillies and Aladdins. Jock Johnson had a power plant, and we had a power plant down the hall later we put in. But before that they used to hang 3 Tilly lamps up, pump them up when they got a bit low.
You'd have a fire in 2 rooms?
Had a kitchen stove and a fireplace in the front room, and it was an open hearth sort of thing, and you just put your blocks of wood on it. Usually had a lump of railway line across to stop the wood falling out. The yards were all, they would have all been 1/4 of an acre. They were all big yards. And getting back to your fruit trees, most of them had fruit trees. We had plum, peaches, nectarines and plums in our yard.
And they were, you'd pick those and preserve
them.
them
As they ripe, and they were good, yeah.
Locusts?
Well, locusts there, but we didn't have any. We used to get them. We'd go to Starrett's and they had a big tree. We'd ask Mr. Starrett could we climb the tree. Someone else would have apricots, and old Russ had everything up there. He had apples and pears and peaches and anything you wanted, plums. We used to go and get them.
And tell me about the night cart.
Yeah, well, that was...
Whose job was that?
When we first went there, it was old Russ Dalton, my grandfather, who used to come round there. I can remember when Jim Wilson used to do it, but when we went back, old Russ was doing it. And he'd come round, and later on Bill Carter did it. And then later Georgie Gedlin was doing it, you know. All depends who was there, but they used to use a horse and dray. They'd usually fit enough pans on the cart to do all the houses. They'd take that up past the old football ground, and they used to have a trench dug up there, and they'd tip it into that. Not very hygienic, because later it'd probably all run down to the creek. But it was a fair run. And mostly they used to cover it up eventually. But the rubbish went to the same place. That used to go up there too, just in the bush from the old footy ground.
What did the town folk do for fun in your day?
Well, gossiped. The ladies often go to each other's place to have a cup of tea. I know Mum and Phyllis Harmer and Auntie Joyce or Auntie Ada, who was living there, used to take turns at having tea at their place, and Mary used to walk down to your nana's and have a cup of tea. And we'd go over to people's place and play cards. Weekends usually go either marining down the river or cobbler fishing, swimming down the river, jugging in the Jew Creek. They used to try and catch trout in the creek, and kangaroo, and used to often catch a horse and ride out the bush, take a couple of dogs and try and get a kangaroo.
What did you do with the kangaroo?
Bring him home. The old man would skin it, hang it up, and we'd eat it. And we'd take parts out the river marining, go catch a marron, and use other for dog feed. We never had much sport there. There was a bit of badminton they played later in the hall, and we did have a basketball team that used to go to Waroona. I played in that, but that started in 1956, so I was married then.
What about football?
We used to play a few picnic games with Hoffman. They'd pick a team and come over to Nanga, or we'd go over to Hoffman. And I was only about 12 when I first played in one of them. And
was it a bit rough house?
Well, I remember it was rough on the hill, and I remember playing on a bloke called Joe Boyd, and I was only about 12, and I kicked a goal on him. He said to me, "You do that again, son, I'll kick your ass." And my dad was standing behind him, and he said, "Yes, Joe," he said, "and then I'll kick yours." I thought that was a bit funny. But yeah, they used to have those. And we used to have a few little picnic meets, runs and that, you know. But that was about it. Dances every Friday night, every second Saturday. We used to go over to friends' place and play cards. Sometimes people would come around to each other's house and have a game of Monopoly or something. But mostly people went to bed, got up early. Weekends they'd be a bit more sociable.
Mm. Ron, where were you when the fire went through, the big fire?
When it actually went through, I was back at Collie. I'd been at Nanga Brook all that weekend. It was a long weekend, and I had a couple of days off. While that fire broke out, it was going, and all the men at Nanga had to go to it. Now, I was there on the Saturday, Dad, Jimmy and everyone went. So on the Sunday, I went with them.
And where did you go?
Pindalup, up past Warramie. And again on the Sunday I went to Pindalup. And what we were doing up there was just getting around making fire breaks, because the ground up was like a peat. It was very deep with dried rubbish and stuff from trees that had been ring-barked during the Depression, and all the stuff had fallen down and just built up on the ground because it smouldered, and you had to rake it and get the fire out. Well, all that was still smouldering, and because on the Sunday night we raked it up and went home because they were going back to get Bundy. So
at this stage there were lots of smaller fires going.
Yeah.
So was it very widespread?
Yeah, back towards Hollyoak and that, and all up there to Ramey. It was spot fires. Apparently they'd been caused a lot by lightning. There was quite a few crews out fighting them. Anyway, we were doing this one. I was there on the Sunday and the Monday, doing the same thing. Yeah, just raking these fire breaks and making sure everything was safe, there was no fire. And we left and went back to Nanga Brook. Next morning, Dad and Jimmy and them all went again, and I did because I was going back to Collie. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you could see the fire building up. I was ready to go back to Collie. I was getting in the car. And Mum said, oh, I don't like the look of that. I said, oh, don't worry about it. There's a river between here and there. And of course I left and went to Collie. Next morning I got up, and there's ash everywhere. And I said, Barry, gee, something's happened. So I put the radio on, and they said the dwelling up had burned, Nanga Brook had burned. So I went and swapped my shift and went down to Waroona, where I found out what had happened. And the Nanga Brook had burned. Didn't know where Dad was, didn't know where Jimmy was. I knew where Mum was, she was in Waroona. So then I found Jimmy, he was at Pinjarra, I think it was, and I found out that the old man was still up somewhere in a utility. So I went looking for him. Police had a roadblock up, but they let me through. And we met them coming down between Capel and Coolup and Dollingham. They'd been out Bankshire way. That was when the rain come down. That's when they brought the army up. All made out the army saved it, but the rain saved it. See, what happened, I think, was that was a forerunner, it was the tail of a cyclone, and the wind came before the rain, which pushed the fire and made it a hell of a fire, but then the rain came and sort of dampened it, and the winds died, of course. The fire would have been round about Willowdale, I should imagine.
And so when your dad and you were up there doing the fire breaks, who was that? Were you working as single units or were you working under the forestry?
Yeah, Jack Marshall, the forestry bloke, was in charge of us, and we were with his crew, and we were there helping him. There was probably half a dozen of us beside the forestry blokes. Can't remember who they all were now. But I was with Dad, and we had our jobs to do. We had to rake this road and whatnot. I mean, Dad was a good bushman. Jack Marshall was a good bit bushman. And they were in the army together. He was Dad's captain, I think. Up there we were drinking this water and used to get it out of this tank that we were aiming. And later on, because they found dead kookaburras in it, they called it kookaburra water. We used to have to boil it before you drink it, you know. But that was never hurt anybody.
In terms of the forestry, what sort of equipment did they have?
They had water tanks on their trucks. I think they only had hand pumps. They may have had little machines, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. They probably had them as hoses. They'd run out, small ones, but they weren't big tanks. They weren't big trucks. They probably only had about 500-gallon tanks on them.
What did your dad tell you? Did he explain what actually happened on the day? Was he in danger at any time?
No, I don't even know where they went on the Tuesday. I presumed they went back to Pindler, but I know Dad finished up around Bankshire somewhere. And Jimmy, they were down there somewhere, but I don't know. I think they may have been behind the fire, I think, but I don't really know. But Jimmy and them, they were in front of it because they were in a truck, and Johnny and Graham Glass, they went out to rescue, I think, old Taylor. And of course they got him and they got into town, but they only had to jump a log with the truck and they just about wrecked the truck, but they got in there. Flames all around them, you know. No one was worried about the truck. It was them they were worried about because they were in danger, you know. The flames were leaping all over them. And because they got to the hotel and Jimmy had to get up on the roof, and a few of them got up on the roof, put that out, that was starting to burn. And of course Dollingham was burning then. That's all I know. I only know what I've been told.
So they didn't actually get back to Nanga Brook?
No, Johnny and Graham Glass did, I think. But I'm not sure if Johnny got straight back there or not. Someone got back there and told them they had to get out. I know George Gedling and Jock Johnson went towards Dollingham to have a look, and then hopped in their cars and raced back to Nanga and told everyone to get out because the fire was coming.
And how did they get out?
Cars, they were all ready to go. And all the women went. Jock and George Gedling and Peter Bellasini and perhaps someone else, may have, old Walton, I think, he was the office Johnny at the time. They stayed there. They sheltered down behind the sawdust heap. And everything blew over them. And of course their houses just went up. And there was 3 left, plus the school was still left. Yeah, and then, yeah, I don't know just where Johnny was then, whether he'd come over and warn them. I know him and Graham Glass come back the next day. They come back to Nanga Brook. See, because they didn't, not everyone went. Jock never went. George Gedling never went. Peter Bellasini never went. There was a few did, a few had jobs to do and they stayed and did them, you know. Dido, I don't think he went. It's just mainly the workers. I know Dad went and I went because I was there. Forest used to pay us. I got a cheque about 6 months later in the Forest.
What was the general feeling amongst the survivors when you found them all?
Oh, they were a bit stunned and most happy to be alive and a bit worried about where people were that we didn't know. I mean, Mum didn't know where Dad was. We just didn't have a clue. We had an idea. Someone said he was up around Bankshire, so I went looking for him and we found him coming back. Jimmy, they were in dwelling up itself and when it all finished. And I don't know just how it finalised. I think the fire just went through and that was it. It's just a case of waiting for it to go out.
And were you with your parents when they went back to Nanga Brook? Was it a while before they were allowed through?
They weren't allowed there because people were doing a bit of ratting on the place. But I went back through there a couple of days later because I had a couple of guns and they were at Dad's place. I had to go and get them. So I did. It must have been about a week. I don't know where Mum and Dad and them stayed. I don't think they stayed at Nanga. They may have done.
So whose houses survived?
Mum and Dad. The one next door where I used to live, there was someone living there. Might have been Jack Carter. And the empty one next door, that was, and the schoolhouse and the school was saved. That was it. Yeah, I'm just not sure what Mum and Dad did then. They may have stayed there. I'm not sure about, probably about a week, Millers decided not to rebuild. They decided they shift them up to Carrigaline.
And how was that communicated to the workers, do you know?
A bloke called Springthorpe. He was the, I think he might have been the general manager at the time. He met with George Gedling and they discussed it and decided that they'd go to this Smales Mill, which had been closed for about 12 months, and they'd reopened it. And that's where they went. And, at that time Janice was going with Nick Tanner and they had a truck and they come and shifted our furniture up, Mum and Dad's furniture. And I had days off then, I came over and went with them.
Did Smales Mill take most of the town?
Not for a start. Who went there for a start?
Johnson.
Jock Johnson, Dad, your father, Bill McCall, Tommy Harmer, Ralph Powell, and that might have been about it. Oh, and the Johnson boys.
Did it take long to get the mill started?
No, it was just about ready to go. They got it had to go within a week or two. Had to do a bit of work. It was just about ready to go. They had to go out and get timber, of course. Then, see, Dad drove the truck. He looked after the bush, and they hired a faller. A couple of fallers might have come up there. And they had a truck driver, old Gary, old Jim Dalton. He was the tractor driver and Dad drove the truck and looked after the bush. And later on Jimmy went up there. And then once the mill got going, old Bill Starrett, he was there. Johnny come there, or Jimmy Pratt.
So I suppose in a way it was good that it was sad, but it was good that they could keep a lot of the people together.
Yeah, most of the people got furniture and stuff donated, plus a bit of money from the government, but they got radios and knives and forks. I think your mother still got some of them, and different furniture. They got new kitchen suites and enough to
start
live
again.
On, yeah.
What did it do to people's emotional state?
They took it like bloody Britons, actually.
Did they?
Yeah. Yeah, they coped really well, I thought. Mum was a bit embarrassed because her house didn't get burnt down. Everyone else's did. But no, I don't think everyone really got down the dumps.
Do you think that was sort of part of, because they lived in the bush, they lived with fire, they lived with the risk of fire?
They lived with all their lives, you know. I mean, fire was always a threat in the bush. I mean, every summer, just about you'd get a bushfire, and it was always a threat. People used to watch it. But they used to burn around the towns a fair bit. But of course they cut out doing that, and the bush just gradually got worse. And you get back to your dad, well, we travelled over, and I used to come over from Collie, and we re-fenced the place. Did a lot of fencing there. We used to cut the fence posts, and your dad was supplied with the wire. They helped pay for that, what do they call it, the relief fund. So we went and built fences. We built a bit of a humpy there. You can probably remember that, a bit of the old iron, and found an old bed and a stove, and put it in. It was quite comfortable. We could live in it. And the old dairy was still going. It was burnt down. I think they finished up making a shed out of that. And I used to go over there on my days off. Sometimes I'd go over there during the week when Dad was working, but most times it was weekends when he was there. Bought an old tractor at Collie and took that over there, because he's got burnt. Fiddle around a fair bit. And
what about the fact that people they've met every day on the anniversary? Who started that idea?
I don't know. It just sort of come up as a mutual sort of thing. We'd have a bet to Nanga, and I think it was 3 or 4 years before they did.
Did you go to the first one?
Yeah, there was a hell of a crowd there that day. It was a big crowd. And that was actually down at Nanga, and the ashes and all that was still there. And it was, I think it was down there. It might have been up at Old Russell's. Anyway, we all went down to the town, but there was a lot of people. Even your Auntie Val was there that day. I remember her being there.
And isn't it a strange phenomenon that it's continued for almost 50 years?
Yeah, well, so George Johnson, they sort of kept it going and made sure people went. Jimmy Johnson particularly. Now Danny Duffy sort of does it. But it's getting that way now. We're running out of people.
And so that's why it's important that we can tell the story, isn't it?
Yeah, well, see, all the original inhabitants have died. Your mother would be probably the last. And Eni, can't think of it. The older inhabitants. I mean, Graham Glass is still alive, George Johnson's still alive, Jimmy's still alive, and George Gedling and Duthys and quite a catchpole and all them. Porty, I mean, they're all still alive, but all the adults that were adults then have died.